Okay. Oh, look at
Just
you.
kidding. Did you say we're live? We are live. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming out this evening. Virtual audience, thank you for joining us. You might wonder at the colorful costume that I'm holding on to. And Peter, here we go.
Okay, so I better explain. First of all, I'm not here to. This is about Mrs. Plansky Goes Rogue.
Okay.
It's the new book that just came out today. But some of you may know I write the Chet and Bernie Mystery Series, which is a detective novel, which is a series modeled after Holmes and Watson, where the sidekick tells the story in the first person. But in this case, the sidekick, Chet, is a dog, and Bernie's the detective, but he's not a talking dog. Right? He's as canine as they could make him, and it's that tension that if it works, it's because of that. One of the many, many little subplots in the series has to do with their impecunious situation. Bernie,
It's only mildly good.
Bernie has made, and they hate taking divorce work, but they so often have to because they're desperate for money. So Bernie has made two financial missteps. One had to do with tin futures in Bolivia. Chet isn't aware of whether they bought them or sold them, or whether it was because an earthquake happened or did not happen. In any case, they lost that whole investment. But the other thing, Bernie likes to wear Hawaiian shirts. So in one of these moments of inspiration that some of you, we all get, he one night thought, Hawaiian pants. People like Hawaiian shirts. Why wouldn't they like Hawaiian pants? So a whole boatload of Hawaiian pants he ordered, from the East, and it came in a barge, and now they're all in a self-storage in a section of the valley where he lives in Arizona, and not one pair has been sold. So sometimes they go into the self-storage just to look and sit there and look at it. But actually, in the next Chet and Bernie, a cat was involved. No, it's called, what is the name of the next?
What? Is it me or Peter?
Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Yes, thank you. In Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, I exploit this self-storage more, and actually there's some drama that goes on. Anyway, the point is, when I arrived here tonight at the store, waiting for me was a package. And in it, one of the readers of Chet and Bernie has made Hawaiian pants. Now, I think with the idea that I would wear them to...
The pocket is really key, I think, to the success of these pants. Are we having trouble with the microphone?
Yeah, I'm going to swap out.
Nothing was...
All right.
No, they heard.
Oh, they heard,
You're
but...
just quiet.
Right. You need to hold it closer.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. All right, so what's going to be okay, here's the Hawaiian shirt, which I'm willing to try on in public for the first time, because how bad can it be? I mean, it's not, I don't mean the shirt, and I'm not, the reader who made it, I'm sure, did a fantastic job. I just mean on me, right? Maybe
I think you should try it
Right,
on.
okay, so
I'll
I'm
hold.
gonna
Yep.
All right, so I'm
I'll
gonna-
talk while you model this thing. So when I walked through the store, one of our staff thought I had a quilt, and so I'm going to suggest, here's an idea for Bernie, that maybe the colorful Hawaiian pants could be turned into quilts.
Okay, that's, there's a plot point.
Exactly.
By the time I leave tonight, I want to have an outline for the next, from you guys.
Right.
Which,
Can I interject and ask a quick question?
of course.
So, what kind of breed or mix is Chet?
It
Wait.
never said.
Wait. I have to.
Oh, I can't yet.
No, I have to repeat the question, or people can't hear it. What kind of a breed is Chet? And you never say, right?
I never. All he knows, all Chet knows is what. All Chet knows is what people who are rude enough to talk in front of him about his appearance say. So he's 100+ pounder, and he's all black with one white ear. That's really all he knows.
Because I think of him as a boisterous.
As what?
No.
Okay.
I don't think that.
That's why we call it fiction.
Right. I don't think that Chet is really a boisterous basset hound, although it's an interesting idea. You know what, Peter? That is tailored. It's tailored just right for you. Look at that. Whoever sent it, good job. It's an excellent fit.
Thank you. Her name is Mary, and thank you, Mary, for this.
It's
the
really,
pants will probably be worn sometime later in the tour.
it's very colorful.
Yeah.
I like that.
Thank you.
It spruces you up.
Thanks.
Right.
Yeah, I need sprucing, so
There
it's
we
good.
are.
It's good.
So we are going to talk about Mrs. Plansky, but I should say, for those of you who are Chet and Bernie fans, that Peter has let me know that there are 3 more under contract. And the fact that they all take place here in Pottsville with occasional forays elsewhere, I think Pottsville was a stretch, but nonetheless, I can live with Pottsville. I can.
Well, I think I've actually, it's Pottsdale the way, so I made it even more obvious. But
Oh, is it Pottsdale?
yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
But I think, well, I'll have to check. But yeah, I think it is. Wow. I mean, I love it out here, but it's just perfect if you have a big, I'm sorry to say, a big dog in a story. I want them to be in a metropolitan area, but surrounded by vast wilderness, where that whole animal side can come out. And of course, when you have a wilderness and you like writing action scenes, like, it goes together.
It does go together. Now, for those of you who really like, the sort of Gone Girl kind of twisty story and whatever, Chet is an unreliable narrator only in the sense that he can only understand what he can understand, right? So you, the reader, have to do sometimes a little work to figure out what it is that Chet is telling you.
Well, there's a gap, and it works both ways, because his certain senses of his are far stronger than ours. Smell, obviously, but also hearing. So at times he's way ahead of Bernie the detective, and therefore we are, the reader, and at times he's behind.
Right.
It makes it fun, for me.
And I brought that up because that same kind of, I don't even know what I want to call it, voice that Peter brings to that series, Mrs. Plansky, is not totally dissimilar to Chet.
Well, okay,
There's
so
a certain
interesting point.
Well, it is because her view of her children is a little bit like Chet's view of Bernie.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So there's a, right. She is, in a way, not that realistic
Yep.
about them at times. And I think this, yeah, there is a similarity because they're both good-hearted. Chet
Absolutely.
is good-hearted, and Mrs. Plansky's good-hearted, too.
Right.
She's been described by some readers as a badass. Okay, so she's a 71-year-old widow retired to Florida. She and her husband, Norm, they're from Rhode Island, and they built a modestly successful sort of kitchenwares business. It all came of an idea of hers. He was an engineer. She was a paralegal. They took the kids camping, and one morning when she was fixing breakfast for everybody, so she was slicing bread, she said, wouldn't it be nice if the knife could toast the bread while you were slicing it? And Norm, in his sleeping bag, an engineer, sat up. And that was the beginning of the Plansky toaster knife. And so
See what I mean? All right. He's already justified what I had to say.
Mrs. Plansky, she really did. You can see by reading between the lines that she did it. Her relationship with people, sales, marketing, that was all her. He made it happen, the actual product. Anyway, they were a terrific team. And so they sold out and retired to Florida to have their golden years. But one of those fast-acting cancers got him, and now she's alone, except she's responsible for her 98-year-old father, who is problematic in almost every way he could be. So that's really the kind of setup of her. And I think, so the good-heartedness, but some people have said, like reviewers, that she's like a badass. That's not what she is at all. Reviewers, a total miss. She's a proper older woman. She, not in a way that's snobbish at all or anything. It's just, she would never want to make herself the center of attention or to hurt anybody's feelings, that kind of person. Nevertheless, when you put her into dangerous situations, she's very capable. And that's one of the reasons I like writing about her.
She has mad motorcycle skills, for example, in the first book, if you read it.
She has had an adventurous life at times. So she worked on a ranch out west when she was in high school and college. She had a boyfriend there who had a motorcycle, and he taught her how to ride it. So she knows this. And in this book, she's in Rhode Island. She and her best friend did a lot of snorkeling and diving. They were taught by an expert. And so she's still a decent free diver. And that's very important in
It
Mrs.
is.
Plansky Goes Rogue.
Pat keeps saying that you need
We
to
need
do
to keep holding the
right.
thing.
Pat, if we have a lavalier mic, would you rather pin it on Peter? Would that be easier?
I'll just be a good boy,
Okay,
you know.
I know. It's just, it's
Yeah,
right.
a biscuit,
It's
thank
just,
you.
it's hard for the virtual audience to pick up on the low sound, and also I've been asked to repeat questions so that they can, they
Oh,
can hear it.
yeah, okay.
Right. But Mrs. Plansky has a son who has not found his way in the world, would be possibly the way I would describe it.
Jack. She has
Jack.
2 children. One, a daughter, Nina, who's the marrying kind, and a son, Jack, whose dream was to be a professional tennis player. And he is, in the sense that he's a teaching pro. And he's working at a big, when we see him in this book, he's, supposedly attached to a big tennis center in Arizona. But he's gotten involved with a couple of speculators. And these speculators know that Mrs. Plansky has a certain amount of money, or maybe, I don't want to give too much away, but she looks on the bright side with her kids. Also, I love playing tennis, so I'm very interested. And Mrs. Plansky plays tennis, and she's good. So the book begins with a doubles match in Florida. She's retired to Florida, and it's a seniors match, and it ends with a bang. And I like writing about sports, but her son is a much better player, of course. And so tennis, but he hasn't. So it's the idea that if you build your life around a dream like that, and then it doesn't happen, and it's a dream that's really a boyhood dream, and you keep doing boyhood things into adulthood, meaning you're still in the tennis world, but not happy just to be a teacher of tennis, which could be a terrific career, but you're stunted. And so that's his situation. So he's going to end up in Florida too. But I don't want to give away too much.
No, well, the thing is that Mrs. Plansky had a lot of money thanks to the toasting knife. And then in the first book, she was bilked of that money, which forced her to go to Romania. And, well, it's a spoiler, but she does recover it, okay? So the fact that she has money makes her more vulnerable in lots of ways. I mean, it allows her to have a life that she has, but it also can make her kind of a target.
Yes, that's exactly true. One of the challenges, I think, but of course I didn't really think of it when I started, but I realize it looking back, is to make a rich person sympathetic. So often in mystery fiction, Ross MacDonald, who I adore, is a really good example. Rich people are never good. But that's not true. And first of all, she's not that rich. She would be the first to tell you. She's what my own grandmother used to call comfortable. She's comfortable. Okay.
Right. And here's the other thing. She's not greedy for more. I mean, the reason so many rich people in crime fiction are dastardly, I love that word, are dastardly is because enough is never enough, which we see all around us, particularly in Washington right now. Whereas Mrs. Plansky is happy to have the large capital that she's got, but she's not looking,
far from it.
to increase it. And therefore, she really is not an unsympathetic character.
I mean, she's in a condo. It's a nice condo, but it's a condo on Little Pine Lake, yes, and with a good view of it. And in this book, as you can see on the cover, there's a gator down in the corner,
Who I might tell you is my favorite character in this whole book.
Well, see, okay, this is something about writing fiction. Sometimes you come upon a character who is going to steal your book, is going to take over. So Fairbanks, she named the gator Fairbanks. So Fairbanks is one of those characters who threatens to take the book over. And the other, there are two in this book, and the other one is her dad, who also
I prefer Fairbanks.
Yes, and you prefer Fairbanks. But her dad is very difficult, but it's her responsibility. So she's not lavish at all, but she's like who is it? I mean, do you remember there was a book a number of years ago called The Millionaire Next Door? You know, ordinary Americans who, for whatever, they worked hard, they saved their money, or they came up with a really good idea, but you would never know it. She's much more like that.
And she's really wants to do well at tennis. So I love the tennis match that you open it, because at one moment it appears that she and her partner are going down to ignominious defeat.
Yeah,
and
so-
then they rally.
So there are two tennis clubs in the neighborhood where she is, which is an imaginary neighborhood, but it's in the St. Augustine Beach area. And one's called the Old Sunshine Club, and that's kind of old Florida, and it goes all the way back to 1986. She belongs to the new Sunshine Club, which is the Araviste one, and that goes back to 1990. So at the Old Sunshine Club, they have to wear all white. At New Sunshine, half white. So in this match, they're right, she and her partner Kev. Now Kev is a single man, slightly younger than she is, but old enough to play in the senior, where he can play in the over 60s. And there's perhaps a bit of romance kindling between them. And he has this yacht that's called Lisette. And something happens to it in this very first scene at the end of the tennis match. In a book of mine where a yacht is called Lisette, guess what? You're going to meet Lisette. Yeah. Okay.
Excellent point. Right. I mean, it could be called the Pelican or
It
something.
could- but then
yeah,
you meet a
no.
pelican. See, and we already have a wild animal in Fairbanks.
Yay, Fairbanks.
I'm not going to clutter it with a whole zoo.
Other wildlife.
of wild
right.
animals. Yeah.
There's no dog either. Well, sorry, but
No,
I mean,
not
no.
really. There is
And he's not a talking alligator.
doesn't say a word, but he plays a major role
That's right.
in the climactic scene. But I'm not going
That's
to go
right.
there.
I know. I said
There is a shark later, but seen at a distance.
It's not. I mean, this is the Jaws anniversary year, right? But I'm glad you resisted.
Yeah. Well,
I'm glad you resisted adding Jaws to the mix.
well, no, I'm not going to add. Well, it's okay. So we're so far off topic. We haven't even begun on Mrs.
Not off
Plansky.
topic. That's the point of the book, is to have fun.
But I just need to make a digression on sharks and Jaws while I'm at it. So I did a lot of spearfishing in the Bahamas when I was young. Some like for money, kind of like a summer job, and I stayed with it. Except for writing, it's the best job I ever had. Now, no one my age does it. It's free diving, breath holding. It's not it's not scuba. That's illegal in the Bahamas, and it should be, because there's no sport involved. You just drop down to 80 feet and lie on the bottom and wait for a grouper to come and shoot and go up. Free diving, okay, so you're on the surface because you're tracking the fish, and then because you always want to drive straight down, you find one. And so we would be working sometimes 70, 80 feet of water on a breath hold kind of dive. And I learned a couple things. One was I learned to love the wilderness. The ocean, once you go, on the surface of the ocean, there are all these boats. So you're not really in a wilderness. You can be, but when you're down, you're in a wilderness right offshore. The sound, everything is different. And I learned to love that. And the second thing I learned was composure under fire, physical composure under fire, because we were hunting grouper and snapper, and so were the bull sharks. You know, we were in the same. So if you got out of the water every time a shark appeared, you know, went back into the boat, you would. So we didn't, but we faced. I mean, I've had sharks take a fish off my spear. I've seen a lot of wild, crazy things, but I didn't want to make a shark. Anyway, so I knew a lot of diving type people in the Bahamas, and there was one boat captain who, I mean, you couldn't have written a character like him. And so Jaws, I'm not going to say his name, but so Jaws was a hit that summer. Everyone was talking about it and going to it. And I said to him, I'll call him George. I said, George, have you seen Jaws? And he said, I don't go to fiction movies. So it wasn't like he only goes to documentaries. He was saying that the behavior of the shark in Jaws, he was disparaging it, right? It was his movie critique. So I've always loved it. I don't go to fiction movies. It's just, it stuck with me. Anyway, so Mrs. Plansky, all right, here's how people say how, you know, what gave you the idea? How did you, and my answer is always the same. It came to me out of the blue. The major idea to whatever I'm going to write, what the book is going to be about, I never search for that. I always wait for it to come out of the blue. After that, like if I'm plotting things out, well, how can I get Jack, the tennis-playing son from Arizona to Florida? What would be a believable reason for doing that? And that led to the whole brewery scene and all this stuff. But so that's what I call active imagination. Then there's passive imagination where something just comes. And so all my books have come from that. So I've been very lucky because my first book came out in 1980. I've been doing this for a fairly long time, and I've written probably pretty close to 50 novels. And I've never had to search for an idea. It's not that I get an idea every day or anything like it, but if you're writing a book a year or sometimes two, if you get 4 or 5 good ones a year, you know, you're off to the races. But for tonight, in case someone said, where'd you get the idea? I started to try to think, okay, where the hell? Why? Where did you get the idea for this book? And I remembered back in childhood, I loved reading pirate stories that often took place in the Bahamas or the Caribbean. I love pirate stories, not just Treasure Island, but pirate stories you've never heard of. For example, Red Pete the Ruthless. Okay, I'm sure no one, okay, it's very possible I'm the only person on the planet. What? No, really, there are 8 billion people. I'm one in this one little field. I'm 1 in 8 billion. I've read Red Pete the Ruthless, which, okay, so it ends as follows. Red Pete is a very bad pirate. There's also a very good pirate and a young boy who likes the good pirate but gets in trouble with it. You can see how the book was built. And at the end, Red Pete is on the beach, buried up to his neck between the high and low tide lines with all his treasure piled around him and the tide coming in. Well, I don't think it gets any better than that. There's Shakespeare and there's Red Pete the Ruthless. So I love pirate stories, and this is a pirate story. So that's where the idea came from. It came from way, way back in my childhood. Do you want to go even further back to before I could read?
Sure.
We've lost control already. People, we've lost control of the whole evening.
It's time to wear the pants.
No, and the shirt's warm. I'm going to be taking it off. I must have been 4 years old. My dad told me this story. So I was in pre-K, something like that. And every day in our pre-K, we would go for a walk. And even if it was raining, but if it was raining, we went for an indoor walk. But it was still, it was an imaginary walk. We were really walking, but the teacher would say, there's a car, and we'd come to a stop, or there's a red light, stop. And so we'd all clomp to a stop and continue our walk through the classroom, but the scenery was imaginative. Did I explain that in a way that conceivably could be understood? Okay, so we're walking along, and the teacher said, okay, class, here's a puddle. And all the kids walked around the puddle, except for me. I walked straight through the puddle. And the teacher said, Petey, I was called Petey in those days, what about the puddle? And I said, I've got boots on. I didn't have boots on, of course. The boots, too, were imaginary. When my mom came to pick me up, the teacher told her that story. And that was when my mom, who was a writer, realized she had a potential writer. And she, by the time I was 12 years old, taught me most of what I know about writing.
It's a wonderful story.
She died before my first book came out, or before I had started. Yeah, so she never knew. That's one of those plot twists that I would rather hadn't happened.
True. So you mentioned Treasure Island. I'm going to digress literarily here for a minute because we're all about digressions now. Treasure Island was a really groundbreaking book in the sense of narrative, because I don't know if you know this, but we had a conference years ago where Justin Scott gave this amazing paper about it. Stevenson was writing Treasure Island, and he got stuck. He absolutely could not make it work. And I'm trying to remember the sequence, which way it is, but let's say that it was being told in somebody or other's third-person voice. Do you remember? Starts out in third person.
It's Jim, but
But it switches. So when he got stuck, and I think he was writing third person and observing rather than, he made a decision to switch and let Jim speak for himself. And that was a really dramatic and innovative storytelling technique. And, you know, it's worth going back and looking at Treasure Island if you're at all interested in writing and the craft of writing to see how Stevenson did that. And I've learned over the years from lots of authors about other interesting tricks. David Morrell, for example, and I'll stop digressing here. When he sold Rambo to the movies, he gave up rights to write any other characters that resemble Rambo. And he was working along on a novel, name which I can't remember, and he was about 2/3 of the way through, and he suddenly recognized that the character he was writing was Rambo. And what was he going to do about it? And how was he going to reimagine this story? And he did a really simple thing. He changed the name of the character. And when he changed the name of the character, he was able to reimagine the character and finish the book. So I've always thought that was, I've often thought I should read a book and then in my head go back and rename like the lead character and see how I felt. Because, you know, we all have names we don't really love. For example, you probably knew somebody, you know, way back in the day, and you don't ever like somebody named Bruce or Petunia or whatever it might
I like
be.
Petunia.
Well, that usually goes with pigs, but nonetheless. But I've often thought from a reader's standpoint, it would be interesting. What if we didn't call her Mrs. Plansky, for example? What if you read the book and you decided you were going to call her something else, you know? And then it would be a completely different book.
Well, I can't actually write a character until I have the name. Okay. I have to have the name first.
How did Plansky come to you?
Oh, it's another long digression. I'm hopeless. Where I went to college in Western Massachusetts. Okay, I went to the same college my dad did. And there was a legendary track coach there. So the Navy sent my dad to Williams. During the war, they needed officers really quick. And they sent him, and he ended up commanding a sub-chaser in the English Channel toward the end of the war at the age of 21. They grew up fast in those days. So he ran cross-country at Williams, and the coach, there was a legendary coach there named Tony Plansky, who had been an All-American football player, and my dad used to tell me stories when I was a kid about all the funny things. He thought none of these athletes he was coaching he recognized as real athletes, right? But he tried to coach them anyway. When I got to Williams, he was still the coach. So he was this legendary figure, and I just, the name just seemed right to me, because it's not a, it's a kind of working class, and he was blue collar type name. So when I was out on the tour for the first book, Mrs. Plansky's Revenge, at 2 separate book signings, relatives of his came up to me. Yeah. How did you, that kind of thing.
So there probably aren't loads of Planskys in the
No,
world.
no, but they knew, I guess they knew there was a Williams connection. They knew there was something. Why, how did you do this? So anyway, that was wonderful when something like that happens at a signing. So if there's a Plansky here tonight, please come forward.
But one of the real joys of reading your books is that it's easy to see how much fun you're having. You can tell when he's talking, right, about how much he's loving it, and it comes across in your books. There's that wonderful sort of good humor that just bubbles along.
Well, but some of my books
The
are
early
very
books,
dark.
no, the early books were, but
There's-
once you moved towards Chet and Bernie. Because
Okay.
your last Peter Abraham's book, I still remember as one of the most hair-raising. No, it wasn't hair-raising. It was heartbreaking. The one where the gentleman died of asbestos in the end. It broke
nerve
my heart.
damage.
Yep, that was a
Nerve damage.
really dark book.
Yes, but see, that's the thing, and that's one of the reasons I moved away from those, because I did have in a couple, the hero died at the end. Well, it's real life, and it hardly ever happens, because how are you going to do a series, right? But it hardly ever happens, because there's a worry that you're going to disappoint the audience, or it's going to be too much for them. But so anyway, I did it. Okay, and I'll just give you the setup for nerve damage because I just remembered it now. It's this guy. He's a sculptor, a fairly well-known sculptor, and he finds out he's dying of asbestosis, from asbestos poisoning, and he happens to get a look at his obituary that's going to be in the New York Times. These obituaries are usually written ahead of time, except for the date. They fill in the date, and he gets a look at his obituary, and there's a mistake in it. And he starts looking. In other words, it says something happened in his life that did not happen, but did it. And so it's actually an amateur sleuth story, but disguised in that way. Anyway, we weren't going to be talking about that. But I do enjoy, it's not that I'm giggling, and there are dark things in Mrs. Plansky too. Here's what I enjoy about writing, and I do still enjoy it, just as much or more. You're in a heightened state. And I hadn't realized that till sort of recently. When I'm actually doing the writing, I'm not talking about revision, I'm talking about making up the story. You'll recognize this much more in music. If you watch some band playing, they're in a heightened state. Louis Armstrong was in a heightened state. Mick Jagger is still in some bizarro world, heightened state. Okay, so it's obvious in that. You can see it. Ray Charles, America the Beautiful. That's a heightened state. And I'm sure it happens with painters, although I don't know, but but it happens in writing too, at least it does for me. And so I'm addicted to a few hours a day of that heightened state. Now so I sit down. Now after all this time and also being taught by my mother, an expert, I mean, if I didn't have a lot of technique, there'd be something wrong. There'd be even more wrong with me. Let's put it that way. So I'm not, but sometimes I sit down and I'm not writing. I'm sitting there for 5 or 10 minutes. I'm waiting for the drug to hit almost.
It's a dopamine hit. Is
Yes,
that what you're saying?
But I don't know if it's I don't think it's well, I don't think it's a real drug. It's a imaginary, but I'm waiting for that to come, and then, the fingers start moving. So that's the pleasure of it for me, and it's still. So however, I wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't for a living too. I mean, I wouldn't do it for just fun, because it's hard work too.
So, Mrs. Plansky, are you thinking of any more, Mrs. Plansky?
I'm thinking about it, but I can't guarantee it. And the reason is I've signed on to do 3 more Chet and Bernie books. And that's not even counting Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, which comes out next spring. It concerns, and we're off topic again, but it's a missing cat case. And this cat is an internet sensation. So the fact that the cat is missing has to be a secret. Too much money is riding on it. So, and Chet has, of course, Chet's attitude toward cats is negative. And this is a big case. So that's the setup of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. And after that, 3 more. So that's what I'm
Okay, well, there we are. Questions? Anybody? Yes?
Did you think of all the titles? We talked about that.
Right.
Somebody, but I'm just curious. Your titles are great.
Who-
The titles. Okay, this one is all me. Mrs. Plansky Goes Rogue. So is Mrs. Plansky's Revenge. And so are some of the Chet and Bernies. I will say that with the Chet and Bernies, readers do send in title suggestions. I haven't counted, but I have a file that's probably got hundreds. And Cat on a Hot Tin Roof was a reader suggestion. Thank you if you're out there, Reba. A terrific title. And so if your title's accepted on pub day, you get a signed copy of the book. So, yeah.
No, they are fun. You and David Rosenfeld, who writes a really wonderful,
Yes.
also Dogged Pursuit is just in. Now, David's books, the title tends to reflect the dog because there's one steady dog, but all the other dogs are different. And it takes a new dog to spark Andy, who's professionally retired as an attorney, one of my favorite phrases, to go back to work. It's always a different dog.
But are readers suggesting the titles?
I don't know,
Okay.
but the titles are really fun.
Yeah.
And the Christmas ones, the Christmas novella ones tend to be riffs, on
On Christmas?
on Christmas and so forth. So, I think the titles, set a tone for fun. I mean, if you're looking at a title like some of them, that the book is going to have humor in it, even if the case is serious. And Andy is a good lawyer, and some of the people are in really terrible trouble, so it's not like they're cozies, but the title indicates that
Right.
there's going to be a good experience reading the book, I guess.
Well, okay, with Chet and Bernie, dark things happen. They're actually quite noirish, and they're not, but Chet isn't going to die. When in one of the books, Chet had one of those little growths that the vet biopsies, and I thought, hey, I'm going to do a little shaggy dog thing, as it were, and have the results of the biopsy come in the next book. Okay, as soon as that book came out, I was getting emails in all caps. If anything happens to Chet, I will never read another word you write.
Dogs are generally immortal in books.
Chet is the narrator. He's the narrator, right? I mean, of a continuing series.
So what were the odds, right?
Yeah. See, and that's part of the fun of writing Chet and Bernie is writing in the first person, which I'd never done. And Mrs. Plansky is not in the first person. It's in what I call the third person close. I love writing in that too. It's like you're on her shoulder. It's very, very close to the first person, but there's a bit of distance. And in that distance, I can operate a lot in terms of building suspense. You'll see that she's making a kind of mistake that she doesn't see, or finding sympathy for her as a character. Anything. There's all kinds of stuff you can do.
Did you have a question from the online audience over
Yeah,
there?
actually, I have a few, but Peter, one of the questions was, what was your very first book that you ever wrote, and which book was it that you learned the most about your own writing style and how to write? In terms of which one did you learn the most from?
Well, the first book I wrote was The Fury of Rachel Monette that came out in 1980. A lot of my technique was already there, but what I hadn't, so in terms of crime fiction, it's almost like there's a totem pole. The lower face is plot, and some crime fiction is plot only, cardboard characters, terrible dialogue, but plot, but there are readers for that, and you have to have it. It's not just that it's base on the totem pole, but it is the base. You have to have a good plot, and then as you go up, you'll get writers who can do believable characters and who can handle mood and tone and dialogue, and finally at the very top, this is just my theory, you get mysteries or crime fiction that's actually about something. In other words, has thematic material. And I didn't really, in my mind, successfully find that until the book Lights Out, which I think was my 5th novel, nominated for an Edgar, and that's where I was able to introduce thematic material. So the answer to that would be Lights Out. The first book was The Fury of Rachel Monette, but Lights Out was the first one where I think I integrated everything that I wanted to do and was able to build on that after. And I cheated on it. How I did it was, I had Eddie is this prisoner. He's in a Florida jail for I think it's 15 years for a crime he did not commit, and he's become an extreme. Horrible things have happened to him in prison, and he's become a very tough man. But he spends time in the library, not wondering how this came to him, how this happened to his life. It's not that direct. He's not an intellectual, but he's stuck on Coleridge's poem, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And when I stumbled on that idea, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner was this same doing penance for something that wasn't a big deal, right? That's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner and the killing of the albatross. And he identifies with the Ancient Mariner, and I was able to integrate that in his mind in a way that just built that. And now, so I'm not going to give you the ending, just in case you find a copy and read it. That's the answer to that. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. And one final question from the online audience that I have right now. Because you're friends with Stephen King, or you know him, you're acquaintances, do you play an instrument well or poorly? And have you had a chance to play in the Stephen King band?
Rock Bottom Remainders.
Rock Bottom Remainders, yep.
I love music so much. It's a huge part of my life. I cannot play or sing a note. So although he and I do know each other, he would not want me in the band. Okay? It would be really bad. I couldn't even be a techie or a roadie or any of those things in the band. But I adore music. Listen to it all, and not just Americana or anything, all kinds of things.
Right. So let's see. You had a question.
Through your whole long series of Chet and Bernie, everything is consistent on the characters. Do you keep some kind of a character map with features of these characters? Because I have read other series things, and it's like, wait a minute, didn't she have blue eyes in the last one? And I find inconsistencies sometimes, but everything seems.
How do you keep track of your characters
In a
and
series.
and keep it all consistent?
Yeah. So in the Chet and Bernie series, as you know, I mean, there's the main characters, the two of them, Chet and Bernie, and then there's a kind of rotating supporting cast, and then new people, and so how do I do it? Well, it's because I don't want you or any other sharp person like you to say it was Blue Eyes in the last book, because that's not fair to you, the reader. Right? You're along for the ride. You're giving this up this time, and that's correctable. That just anybody could say, okay, well, what were the eye colors? And now, when you can just search anything easily on the laptop, I mean, you can find it in a minute. So that if I worry about it too. I don't want to have unmatched little things like that. On the other hand, I kind of have a decent memory when it comes to the characters. They're not real to me, but they're not unreal either.
That's right.
Well, no, I don't. I look in my own books, right? Yeah, not on the internet. No, but I'll look.
He can search his own Word
Yeah, I
documents.
can search my, like let's say I know a character appeared in, I don't know, The Sound and the Furry, the one that takes place in Louisiana, and the gator appears there too. I'm interested in gators, but let's say. Okay.
Fairbanks has swum from Indiana to
No,
Louisiana
no.
to Florida?
The gator in Louisiana
Is it?
called Ico.
Oh, okay. Not
Okay,
Fairbanks.
And Chet, a completely different gator. In fact, with a different personality than Fairbanks. Isn't that odd? I'm just realizing it now. Like, it's not a cliche. My gators are not cliches.
Distinctly formed
I'm very happy
characters.
about
I
that.
know. It's
This is
absolutely
turning out to
wonderful.
be a great evening. Thank you all for.
So many insights.
coming, yeah.
No, it's great. Did I see another hand up there anywhere? Yes, ma'am.
You can tell us how Fairbanks got his name, maybe, or
How did we name Fairbanks? Or how did you?
Mrs. Plansky names him. You know why? Because I think, I'm trying to remember, but I think it has to do with he has star quality. That kind of star quality of the old movie. See, that's the way she thinks. So, yes, I'm so glad you asked that, because people sometimes ask, how do you build a character? How do you, I never do it by describing the whole character or anything like that. But there's a little thing, how Fairbanks got his name. You learn a bit about her.
Got it. So I would like to say, and you've all been listening to Peter, one of the reasons that I love reading him is his language is wonderful. And way back at the beginning when we were talking about Mrs. Plansky and Kev, what was the verb he used to describe what was going on there? Any of you listen to that? Remember it? He said kindling. Kindling. And I think, that your mastery of language is one of the reasons that I love reading your books. I don't know too many people who would have said it was kindling.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's really, really nice.
Well, but it's
I'm moved to hear that. I love words, and and it wasn't just my mom. I had a very good. This will sound so boring to people out there, but I had a very old-fashioned education in grammar, and then I did it twice because I did a lot of Latin too. And but if you do 4 or 5 years of Latin, at the end of that, you're actually able to read it. And in classical Latin, period, of the great poets like Horace, for example, they had this thing where you said the most with the least. And that really made a big impression on me. And then, my mom said, make one word do the work of 2 or even 3. Never have a paragraph everything has to advance the story. Never have a paragraph that's just about character. Have it move the plot at the same time. Do some dialogue in there. Give it a twist. Bend every note. And the main thing she taught me, don't be like anyone else. So, thanks, Mom.
sorry, one more.
What kind of writing did your mother do?
Television.
Oh, okay.
Your
Yeah.
mom was a TV writer?
Yeah.
What'd she write? Do you remember?
Well, she wrote TV plays back in the day. They were all on Kinney's, and nothing was preserved. But she got sick just at a moment when her career was really about to. Hollywood had gotten interested in her, and that's when she got sick.
Well, on that note, let's say that Peter isn't sick and hopefully will continue not to be sick and come and see us. So thank you all very much for coming tonight. Let's give Peter a round of applause.
Thank you.
Right. So thank you very much, virtual audience. Thank you for joining us. And at this point, if you guys would fold up your chairs and lean them over there, don't lean them on